Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, and today on Record All Monsters, Mothra vs. Godzilla, and false advertising.
Why is the thing running away?
It isn't. You're mistaken. It has spent all its strength. Mothra, the mighty thing is going to die.
Come all without, come all within. You'll not see nothing like the mighty thing. Unless you saw 1961's Mothra. Then you've seen something like the mighty thing. Because the Thing of 1964's Godzilla vs. the Thing, as it was known in the US, is Mothra. Not the Thing from another world that already happened, and not John Carpenter's The Thing either. It won't happen until 1982. No, not that it. That was 1990. And then it made a new version in 2017, with a sequel in 2019. First base! Okay, enough waffling and Bob Dylan and outdated comedy references. Mothra vs. Godzilla has a reputation as one of the very best Godzilla movies. And it deserves that reputation. No, not that it. Okay, I'll stop. In all seriousness, this movie does a wonderful job of marrying the fairy tale tones of Mothra with the grimness of Godzilla's first two outings. Not too much grimness, though, since according to Steve Reifel and Ed Godzisuski's biography of Ishiro Honda, the production team was already beginning to respond to the audience for science fiction starting to skew younger. And the entire third act of this film reflects that. Speaking of that third act, it features some of the very best effects work by the father of Japanese special effects, my man, Eiji Tsuburaya. That's right, it's finally time to talk about the old man, at least up to World War II. Most of my information here comes from August Ragone's thoroughly researched and exceedingly rare book, Eiji Tsuburaya, Master of Monsters, Defending the Earth with Ultraman, Godzilla, and Friends in the Golden Age of Japanese Science Fiction Film. Born in July of 1901, Tsuburaya was referred to as a child's craftsman by a local newspaper due to the quality of his work making homemade airplanes from wood. Born Aichi, little Tsuburaya was always thinking about airplanes and flying. His dream, he said in a 1958 interview, was to fly around the world in an airplane he built himself. This was spurred by the first successful airplane flights in Japan in 1910, and the next year he had another formative experience, when he saw a movie for the first time. Tsuburaya then became obsessed with both airplanes and photographic projection. He even claimed to have made cartoons for his own amusement using a toy movie camera, though his son Akira would later say this was just part of his father's own self-myth-making. At the age of 14, Tsuburaya enrolled in the Nippon Flying School in Tokyo, at what would become the Haneda International Airport. He was enrolled there from 1915 to 1917, when his instructor was killed due to engine trouble on a flight for newspaper photographers. The school closed and 16-year-old Tsuburaya went to engineering school and began working for a toy company to pay for his education. In 1919, during a business party at a tea house, Tsuburaya's co-workers got in a fight with employees of the National Color Motion Pictures Company. Tsuburaya avoided the confrontation and ran into one of the opposing party's employees, film director Yoshiro Edamasa. Tsuburaya impressed him during a conversation about photography on the sidelines of the brawl, and Edamasa hired him to serve as his assistant cameraman. Tsuburaya continued to work at the studio through a merger and Edamasa's resignation to visit Hollywood up until December of 1922, when he was conscripted into the Imperial Army. Honorably discharged after 6 months of service, Tsuburaya returned home, intending to run his family's general store, but decided instead to pursue his new dream. He left the store with his uncle Ichiro and rejoined Kokukatsu Studios, which had purchased Natural Color Motion Pictures Company before Tsuburaya's military service. He was invited back to work at Kinugasa Motion Picture League in Kyoto and worked as their chief cameraman and an uncredited assistant director. He also innovated with camera equipment, creating a wooden crane for wide, sweeping movements. By this time, Kinugasa was absorbed into Shochiku Studios. In 1929, while Tsuburaya was working with his wooden crane, a part of it collapsed on him. A young woman touring the studio with her friends rushed to his aid and would visit him daily while he was recovering. Miss Masano Araki married Tsuburaya in February of the next year. The 1930s were off to a great start for Tsuburaya, and in 1933, he came to the same crossroads seemingly all monster makers reach at one point or another. In 1933, Eiji Tsuburaya was one of the millions of people who saw King Kong. In December of that same year, Tsuburaya published an article detailing how Kong's effects were accomplished. He had figured Willis O'Brien's stop-motion techniques out by watching his own personal 35mm print of the film, one frame at a time. This led to his then-current studio, Nikatsu, to allow him to experiment with various special effects techniques. They grew impatient, though, with his constant tinkering and perfectionism, and he quit the studio. He found work somewhere else quickly, though, and by the end of 1934 was chief cameraman at J.O. Studios, where he built a truck-mounted iron version of his wooden camera crane. In 1937, Tsuburaya joined the recently formed Toho Studios at the behest of executive producer-manager Iwao Mori. He was reluctant at first since it involved a change of focus. Mori wanted Tsuburaya specifically because of his innovations with special effects, and had him head up that newly formed department. In 1939, he began making flight training films for the government, producing spectacular footage and earning a certification for acrobatic flying. His bosses at Toho were more impressed with the former, and it resulted in more and better assignments. And that brings us back to World War II, and for now, that's where we'll leave him. But we'll rejoin Tsuburaya shortly. There's too much to talk about all at once in his life, and I did want to touch a little bit on American International's bizarre marketing campaign for Mothra vs. Godzilla, the movie we're supposedly talking about here today. The first thing I want to note about the American version of this movie is it contains a spectacular effects sequence wherein the U.S. Navy bombards Godzilla on the beach. It's one of 3 similar sequences in the movie, but together, these scenes sell the outright indestructibility of Godzilla, and the problem the Japanese people face if Mothra will not come and help them. After his comedic wrestling antics in King Kong vs. Godzilla, the King of the Monsters is once again a walking terror. There's a deep sense of justice in this film, but also of mercy, a concern for the innocent to be preserved from the punishment meant for the wicked. But what level of culpability do we bear for the transgressions of our neighbors, countrymen, race, and all of humanity? Sekizawa's seemingly simple fairy tale script, much like a real fairy tale, has a lot on its mind. In bringing the movie to America, AIP kept this text intact but bungled a pretty important aspect of Mothra vs. Godzilla. They tried to write Mothra out of it. Note that the Japanese title, which is now Toho's preferred international title, builds the large Lepidopteran above Godzilla, while AIP released it as Godzilla vs. the Thing, obscuring Mothra behind giant question marks and disclaimers on their posters, and cutting away with cryptic references in trailers. What is the Thing? This decision is often questioned by commentators, since Mothra had been an established character with her own successful film just 3 years earlier. Why wouldn't audiences want to see her fight Godzilla? I love Mothra, and most fans of Godzilla I know do as well, but that wasn't always the case. I used to think Mothra was lame, especially when I was a kid. I remember renting this movie when I was 5 or 6 and rolling my eyes at the Mothra larva's victory. I didn't understand it, and I don't think whoever made the decision to hide Mothra in the advertising did either. Well, at least as a worst-case scenario. More likely they thought their largely juvenile audience wouldn't be enticed by a big old butterfly as much as a giant radioactive dinosaur. This is a gorgeous film, both in terms of its cinematography and its message, and even if you do think the idea of Godzilla fighting a big fluffy bug is a little silly, well, isn't all of this? Why draw the line there? Enjoy yourself. Maybe reflect a little. The Japanese version of this film ends with the characters asking each other how they can thank Mothra for her help, and coming to the conclusion that the only thing they can really do is their best to make the world a better place. How can you be mad at that?
Godzilla. Terror monster of the motion picture screen meets The Thing. Godzilla versus The Thing. Innocent looking, but so feared pagan man worshipped it. See the battle of gigantic forces spreading terror across the world. Can man's inventions conquer them? See in color, Terrorscope. Godzilla versus The Thing.
Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, and welcome back to Record All Monsters, where we're here with 2 returning guests from Forebear, or he is Forebear, but that's also the name of his channel, on Twitch and YouTube.
Hey,
Austin Douglas Ford.
how's it going?
Going good, good to see you, Austin.
Yeah.
And returning from our King Kong vs. Godzilla episode, we have John Margheim.
Hey, hi.
And of course, as always, my wife and producer, the Courtney.
Hello.
So, we just watched American International Pictures' re-release of Mothra vs. Godzilla from 1964. What are your feelings on this movie, guys?
It was interesting. I think I preferred Mothra over this. I was very thrown off by the incredibly abrupt ending. But like overall, like solid. It was still solid.
John?
I think, like Austin, I also preferred the other one that I saw, Godzilla vs. King Kong, or the other way around.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't enjoy this one. I mean, because there's things about this one that were better than that. Like, I mean, I think all the special effects were better. I mean, I think the like suit design and all that, the compositing seemed somehow better.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not sure what the time gap is between those movies, but the like long distance shots of Godzilla seemed a lot more. They had more sense of like depth of field to them, and created a really good sense of scale. I think also, and I may be wrong, but like I don't remember there being like actors and scenery in the foreground. Like, you know, like life-size actors in the foreground and then rubber suit Godzilla in the background.
There were a couple of scenes like that.
They looked better in this one, then, I think, because they stood out to me as something like, oh, this is This looks good.
They definitely were better in this one. There's in King Kong vs. Godzilla and in Mothra, they used traditional green screen effects. In this one, they actually had an optical printer.
Oh, okay.
That Eiji Tsuburaya, the effects director, convinced the studio to help him buy. And he actually founded his own effects studio to help with some of the cost of it.
Right.
So there were only 2 privately owned optical printers in the world at that time. And one was owned by Eiji Tsuburaya and Toho, and the other was owned by Walt Disney. So
very cool. I think like to touch just real quickly on something that John said. Yeah, like I think we may have touched on it in the episode that we did for Mothra. That the effects in this one aren't quite as good as they are in Mothra. But some of the things that stood out to me that I pointed out while we were watching it are like the miniatures, like the tanks looked so good in this in comparison. Still, obviously, like miniatures or whatever, but like that's like we talked about last time.
Aesthetic
part of the charm, right?
Yeah, and this movie is considered by a lot of Godzilla fans to be the best Godzilla sequel of the Showa era.
Too much business for that.
I
See, that's where I'm at too.
Yeah. I do like this one a lot, mostly for its creature stuff, but I think the human story, while very well woven in, it's a little dull.
Yeah.
Well, it's just it seems like there's so many it doesn't seem as well paced in my mind. I mean, even in terms of like cutting with the creature stuff and the fight scenes and stuff like that. And I mean, I think part of that just comes from the challenge of creating exciting fights with the moth puppet. And so there's a lot of it felt like shots lingered a lot longer than they needed to, especially when you're in like the quick cut sort of frame of a fight scene or something like that. And I mean, like with the not grubs, what are they? The larva, that's the more scientific word. Like, cause that fight at the end, while like cool in concept, it felt like the execution of it was like, I mean, it was like we would go through the same 4 shots 4 or 5 times in a row. We're like, oh, Godzilla's kicking rocks at him again. Oh, they're shooting silly string at him again.
Yeah.
Oh, Godzilla's kicking rocks at him again. Oh, it missed. Oh,
I feel like I saw the same shot of one of the larvae getting hit with a rock in the face.
In the face right here?
Yeah. Like 8 times. I was like, okay, I got it.
But yeah, just some of the, I mean, especially some of the action sequences in the way that the like human story kind of felt like padding for the rest of the movie. Some of the fight sequences felt a little padded out as well.
Totally.
Well, like we talked about the frontier missile scene,
right,
which was only done for the American version, and it's one of 3 scenes of Godzilla versus the military.
Right.
And by the 3rd one, which is cool because it's like when they're dropping the nets on it.
No, yeah, that's great.
But you're also like, we've seen this. It does, for like overall for the franchise as a whole, it does really sell. Godzilla's pretty much indestructible.
Right.
But when you're looking at this as one movie, it can be a little tedious. Like, they're cool effects scenes.
Absolutely.
And when I was a child and I'd watch this one, like, these are times to play with your dinosaur toys.
Right.
And then, oh, monsters. Great. Okay, dinosaur toys.
Totally. No, absolutely. I feel like one of the biggest things for this, where like Mothra is a stronger film in general, is that there were so many things that were set up that just never got paid off. We talked about it during the movie again, but like the scale or whatever it was that was in the water.
Thing they found.
Yeah, like that we never figure out what that is. I really wanted there to be a bit at the end from the dude that was eating the egg the entire movie, and like that never ends up being a thing other than like this guy just really likes eggs. But things like that. I feel like there wasn't a plot point really in Mothra that was brought up that didn't
payoff.
That didn't pay off. That didn't have a conclusion in that. Whereas this felt like it was like you said, like poorly paced in a lot of ways. But like still, I like cool big monster fights.
Yeah.
No, you were gonna say, Courtney?
Well, I think that the strongest part of the movie with the people is, first of all, when they're singing the song to the dying island. It always kind of gets me. And they're like, why should we help you? You didn't help us. And that whole sort of interaction, I think that's pretty well done.
To me, that is my favorite part of the human drama in this movie, and it also oddly feels kind of like the climax.
Yes.
More than the monster fight is when Mothra agrees to help anyway.
Yeah.
That's the big emotional payoff for this movie. And so the way you have kind of like a third act in Mothra actually fighting Godzilla, and then you kind of have like a fourth act of the Mothra larvas versus Godzilla.
Twins.
And the kind of out of nowhere, the orphans or the school children.
Oh yeah. That seemed like it was part of like a cut thing.
But
I mean, actually, Courtney, like 100% it does, right? Like, especially with how many of those shots repeat themselves during the fight, it feels like, man, we have to fill another, like, 15 minutes of this film with something.
Get to feature length.
Right. Like, what can we throw together in the last 2 weeks of shooting that we scheduled?
Well, and the idea of creating stakes for that final act, too, because
Totally.
we've already sort of, like, weirdly wrapped up the, like, corporate greed angle.
Right.
when they both get smashed.
Yeah, just, hey... It's cool.
By the way, that the shadowy businessman, the one who was behind everything, he's played by Kenji Sahara, who was a big Japanese character actor, and he appeared in more Godzilla movies than anyone else, in 11 movies.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, he gets punched in the face a whole lot and then smashed. What did y'all think of that? So both the movies y'all are coming from on this had very strong anti-capitalist, anti-corporate messaging, and that carries over to this one. Do y'all think it was done as well?
No. I think Mothra does it extremely well, and in some ways more subtly than this one.
Much more subtle.
It did. This one felt like, again, like not to like hark on like how poor I feel like its pacing was in places, but this feels like we have to fit the entire plot of Mothra into about 30 minutes to make room for like the rest of the film plus also Godzilla. Because like having watched this and Mothra, obviously not back to back, but essentially in terms of like what movies I've been watching lately, Mothra did this and did it better.
John?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I guess I'd agree, because the whole movie, I was kind of looking at it through a sphere of, like, I mean, because even though it's a big monster movie, I mean, there's still, like, a sort of, I mean, like, all art is political, to be really trite about it, but, like, well, I mean, you know, like, no matter what happens, like, humans are involved in, like, their values and cultural experiences and stuff like that are sort of reflected in the art that they make, intentionally or not. And so that anti-corporate thing, I mean, it's a very like to put it more like contemporary sort of context on it, I mean, it's a very Jurassic Park sort of setup. The thing that's interesting about the sort of the corporate guys is they function more like almost like movie gangsters in terms of this one. It's much more like extortion and I screw you and you screwed me and all that kind of stuff. And like they function much more as mobsters than they do as like greedy businessmen. And so it sort of takes some of the nuance out of the thing, I guess, because they're both reprehensible characters, like regardless of what category they're in.
Right.
I mean, I think it's interesting too, like dealing with notions, because like I also was sort of looking at it from like a colonialist sort of perspective. And you know, the idea of the people from Mothra Island or
Infantile.
Yes. And the sort of the way it almost gets to a point of having this like really strong and it does have like a very strong anti-colonial sort of message to it, while at the same time like doing the same weird thing that several of these movies that I've seen done, where it sort of like exoticizes or orientalizes like these sort of indigenous cultures. And then eventually there's like a weird sort of like, I don't know, neoliberal compromise that comes about where like, well, we'll go save the good ones. And so like, and I mean, again, that's my lens coming onto
No, that's why you're here.
But it is interesting, I mean, because the idea that like, you know, some journalists and a scientist save the world from greedy industrialists by like going and begging indigenous people for help. Who owe them nothing. And so like there's it seems like a glossing over of like maybe like, well, sorry that we nuclear tested on your island a whole bunch, but can you spot us one real quick? Because the thing we made from nuclear testing is, you know, trying to kill us right now. And I don't know, I mean, it's just like, I think it points at the problems. I don't know that it ever deals with them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
No, that's fair. It's fair. And,
I think they used less brown face in this one.
yeah, there seem to be more actual Pacific Islanders among the infant island
Right.
natives.
Not as much bronzer that I didn't notice either.
No, that was all very astute, John and Austin. You guys are good guests.
Thanks, Broseph.
You guys are excellent guests for this show.
I appreciate that.
Any final thoughts on this one?
I mean, I don't think that it's without its strengths, right? I feel like at least all I've done has been like, well, it's not as good as Mothra, but I think
It's not.
for sure. Like I think it's like a perfectly serviceable like monster movie, like big monsters fighting each other. There were a couple of little things even that I was like nitpicking while we were watching it. Like the first time the twins point out that Mothra is just like around them, and then it gets up and flies away, and I literally said like, well, no one's gonna notice that, right? So I think it does a solid job of like helping to establish a universe that's already there, and like building on that mythos and expanding on it in a cool way that like there was a lot added to Infant Island that wasn't there in Mothra, like the chief that was there and everything like that was all super cool stuff. And as someone who has not seen the newest Godzilla vs. Kong, who I believe I heard Mothra is in that movie.
She's not.
Oh no!
She's in Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019.
And
Okay.
she's used very well.
Yes.
Cool. I mean, like it makes me want to go seek out more Mothra stuff.
Yeah.
So I think Robert, your point of getting us to watch these is accomplished. Like I'm invested and curious about it.
John?
I think in terms of final thoughts, I wanted to point out performances that I really enjoyed, which was both the corporate guys. I felt they were delightful, and the editor and Eggman were also
Totally.
like a really nice dynamic. And I wish to one day watch a giant monster movie where like the main character that the audience follows the whole movie like is more interesting than like a cardboard cutout of I am generic man, you are a generic woman. Here is our generic child. Now everyone around us will be 50,000 times more interesting.
The actors you pointed out, I don't know who the egg guy is. He's one of my favorite characters in this. Like I said before, Kenji Sahara was where did it go? Torahata, the shadowy businessman, and Yu Fujiki was Jiro Nakamura, the face of the operation.
I would also be curious to know who the dub voice actor was for the scientist, because he had such an interesting delivery style that almost sounded like Humphrey Bogart every once in a while. And I was wondering if that was affectation or accent.
I don't know. This was dubbed by Titra Studios, which I believe was in Hong Kong and made up of
They sounded...
American and British expats.
It sounded a lot like all of the Kung Fu movie dubs that I've seen.
Yeah,
Right?
and this dub was especially commissioned by American International for their release.
Yeah. And they did misgender Mothra in the dub.
They They also call Mothra the Thing.
Yeah, which was like such a weird choice coming off of Mothra, where they referred to Mothra as Mothra. It was something that I had to check in with you, Robert. Like, am I crazy? Like, did they call Mothra the Thing in the last one?
Well,
They don't respect her.
that is actually a wonderful way to transition to break, because after the break we'll be going to our game show, which is, what is it called? What did I call it? What's in a Name, which is a recurring game we have on here.
Okay.
But our Celebrity Edition.
Okay.
So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll play the game when we come back. Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, host and writer of Record All Monsters, and this is an ad for Anchor. That's right, it's an ad for Anchor, and if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I was really intimidated at first to start this show until I heard about Anchor, and there were a few things that made me feel more at ease to begin. First of all, it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so that it can be heard on a number of platforms, including whichever one you're listening to it on right now. You can even make a little money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And even their ads are easy. The mandatory call to action is something I can state freely. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Doesn't that feel good? This has been an ad for Anchor, and I've been Robert Kelly, host and writer of Record All Monsters. Hello and welcome back to Record All Monsters, where we are still here with Austin Forbear, Douglas Ford.
Hey.
And John Margheim.
Hello.
We need to get more names in there for you, John.
Jonathan Michael Margheim, Esquire.
Okay.
Doctor, lawyer, attorney at law.
Dungeon Master.
Dungeon Master.
Dungeon Master, yeah. We are going to play Dungeons and Dragons when we're done with this episode.
Hell yeah.
I might edit that out. I don't.
Nah.
Losing scene cred.
No, I won't edit that. As a matter of fact, Toho Kingdom, which is a big resource website I use, they have a 3.5 homebrew version using Godzilla monsters.
Well, we have a giant mechanical dragon that basically is Mecha Godzilla
Yeah.
in campaign. So
Well, that's why I have the Mecha
have it
Godzilla
ready.
out. All right, so today's movie is originally called Mothra vs. Godzilla, but when it was brought over to the United States and other English-speaking territories, it was called Godzilla vs. The Thing, and no actual explanation has ever been officially given. Mothra is far from the first or last celebrity to change their names in hopes of reaching a greater audience. So in today's game, What's in a Name, Celebrity Edition, I'll tell you a celebrity's real name and the name they go by now. Your job is to tell me if they actually changed their name or if I, like a celebrity using a fake name, am lying to you. There will be no prizes and penalties. There never are, so stop asking. Courtney, would you please keep score with
Yes.
John on one hand and Austin on the other? All right. So, just so everyone knows how the game will work, I will ask the question. You will each have a turn to answer. You can both score on a round. There are no prizes or penalties, as I said before. And let's go. Question 1. Is Whoopi Goldberg's real name Karen Elaine Johnson? Austin?
I'm going to say no.
I also say no.
Well, it is.
Oh, really?
What?
It is her real name, and I have no further trivia about it.
She's a fan of Tika the Iggy on TikTok.
I don't know who that
I don't either, Robert.
is. Okay, second question. Is Richard Gere's real name Richard Gere?
No. I'm telling you that right now. No.
I'm going to say no.
It is not unless you are French. And he is not French, but both his parents were Mayflower descendants, which makes him instantly insufferable.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right. So it's 1-1 now. Question 3. Is depressed pop icon Lorde real name Ella Maria Lonnie Yellick O'Connor?
Yes.
Austin was so confident in that, I have to say yes as well.
It most certainly is, and I don't really know anything about her.
I actually did know that.
Yeah.
I know the one song that she's famous for, and this other one Courtney likes a lot that I also think is pretty good.
She was in Antarctica.
I
am Lorde. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Lorde thing that's ever been a thing. Her music's really good, but like Stan Marsh being secretly Lorde on South Park was also great.
Once again, I don't know what anyone is talking about. All right. Next question. What's the score, Courtney?
2-2.
All right. Next question. Is human tuba Tom Jones' real name Thomas Woodward?
Yes.
No.
John, you got that one right. It absolutely is. Jones is his middle name. So I'm not sure how big a lie you would consider this one.
It's a little one.
It's a little one. Question 5? We have 3 more questions.
Okay. Question -3.
Is Vin Diesel's real name Vincent Peters?
See, I like the way you worded this because you didn't necessarily say. Oh no.
I'm gonna say no.
I'm also gonna say no.
It is not. His real name isn't Vin Diesel or anything that even sounds remotely like Vin Diesel. His real name is Mark Sinclair. And he has a brother who is his twin who is named Paul.
Love that.
There's
Paul
no tie
Sinclair.
into the movie.
Yeah.
Twins.
All right. What's the score now?
If 4-3.
4-3. Who's ahead?
I am.
John's ahead. All right, 2 more questions. We all know Charlie Sheen's real name is Carlos Estevez, but is his middle name actually Irwin?
Oh man.
I'm gonna say yes.
I'm gonna say no.
Yes, it is.
Damn it. Okay.
Charlie
Fuck.
Sheen's real
Yeah.
name is Carlos Irwin Estevez.
I thought it was Michael.
Yeah, that add up too.
Yeah.
Here is our last question. All right, and Austin, you can't win it this time.
Yeah.
So this is just to see how soundly you're trounced. Is Kat Dennings' real name Catherine Litwack?
Yes.
I'm gonna say yes to that too.
Yes, sadly it is.
It's not that bad.
That's a good one.
As Joe E. Brown said in Some Like It Hot, well, nobody's perfect.
She comes close.
So, that's the game. And what's our final score, Courtney?
I think it was 5-3, 5-4. 5-4, that's what it was.
I love it. 5-4 sounds great.
5-4 sounds good.
I'm sorry. After you said that, we already know who the winner is.
Kind of checked out.
I moved my hands, and then I was like,
That's fair. That's fair. So, just before we go, where can people find all y'all?
You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube at Forbear, PFHORBEAR. I stream 3 days a week at least, and I make YouTube videos whenever I'm not sad enough to not to.
John?
You can find me on these streets. That's pretty much it. I mean, I like Twitter and Facebook, but I'm probably not going to be your friend if you friend me on Facebook. So, Catch me outside someday.
Have a day.
We'll throw hands. It'll be great.
Oh, God.
No, that's not an open challenge to everyone. I know you have listeners in Texas, so
I have a lot of listeners in Texas.
I'm not going to be the hardcore champion of New Braunfels, Texas. 24/7.
Well, with that, we will tell you goodbye. You'll hear the little transition sound that I love so much, that I probably use too much per episode. And then I'll tell you where you can find us. But for now, go to sleep. Go do something productive with your time. Did you have a good nap? Wasn't that refreshing? It's just nice to take a minute and sleep, rest, take some time for yourself. Anyway, that was our episode on Mothra versus Godzilla. Coming up next week, we have a monster mailbag. And the week after that, we'll be talking with author and historian John LeMay about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. I was going to say Ghidra, because it's kind of the version we focus on is the American one, which is called Ghidra, the three-headed monster. Anyway, if you want to contact the show in time for next week's Monster Mailbag even, you can reach us on Twitter, where we're at MonstersRecord, on Instagram, where we're at recordallmonsters.pod, and if you search Record All Monsters Podcast on Facebook, you're going to find us. We also have a website. You can message us through the website. It's recordallmonsterspod.wordpress.com. And you can also email us at recordallmonsterspod@gmail.com. So I'll double down on that endorsement of napping. Have some sleep, eat a sandwich, take probiotics for your gut health. And between now and next time, remember that monsters are your friends.